And a good Wednesday morning, football fans. We appreciate you streaming in with us, the Mac and Mac guys. There is no AI intelligence here. Some may say there's no intelligence here whatsoever, just a couple of guys sitting around shooting the breeze about ball. And that's what we plan on doing for the next couple hours. And we'll get a couple of guys to join in the fray. One a little bit of a different perspective than what we give you most days here on Birds 365. Johnny Mac did not expect this. Come on today and talk about an Eagle roster move, a major needle mover.
I was expecting it. I was expecting more, to be honest. Couple spots, tryout camp last week, rookie camp. You had a bunch of tryout players in. I knew they were going to sign one. I thought they'd sign a couple. But Charleston Rambo. Another guy used to play in college with Jalen Hurts. The Eagles seem to collect those guys.
Which seems like a while ago. 2019 is.
You got to, and guys move around so much in college now. You got to be careful. It's like I was trying to count up how many players played with Jalen in college, which is difficult because he played in two spots like everybody does now. Not everybody, but a lot of players.
Enough, yeah.
And, like I was thinking about Landon Dickerson. I was like, did Landon play with because Landon played at Florida State, for those who don't know, before he went to Alabama. And I'm like, did Landon play with Jalen at Alabama? So, there's a fine line. He did not, by the way. There's always a fine line because guys move around so much, even at the college level.
You have to do research as to find out who is on which roster, what year, and transferred or didn't transfer. And so we do know that Mr. Rambo did play one season with Jalen Hurts, although CeeDee Lamb was the number one wide receiver on that team. Lambo was actually targeted more than Lamb was. So they have a chemistry together a couple of years removed from it. We got to get on your buddy, the tight end who, from down the Jersey Shore. We're going to have Gil on today, so we might bring it up with him. Wasn't he in the Panther camp this past year?
He was. He originally signed as an undrafted free agent out of Miami because he transferred to Miami with the Panthers. Yeah, so Colin Thompson would have been there with them. Yeah, I don't know how much you want to delve into the history. Because
come on, you don't think Rambo is going to be a major contributor for the Philadelphia Eagles this year?
I do not, unfortunately. But you never know.
At least put a call or a text in him and say, "Yo, Colin."
We got a lot of time, so there's no harm in doing it. But yeah, we better get to it early. So I will put the request in.
All right. The Eagles did sign one of the guys that they brought in for a workout. As John said, these are fringe roster guys. These are guys on the 90-man roster fringe, not necessarily the 53-man roster fringe, who are actually going to get involved on a game day type proposition. But at this stage of the offseason, that's what you got. That's what you're talking about. You have your givens, and then you have your couple of guys who are fighting for not too many spots. And if a guy's got a leg up because he's got a relationship with Jalen Hurts, so be it. I think the kind of interesting, more interesting angle to it, and we will get into it with our first guest. Neil Stratton's going to join us from InsideTheLeague.com, and his website deals with scouting and with the relationships that agents have with the teams and how players get signed and looked at and potentially see a career dawn. He's an ex-XFL guy, Rambo, who played this past season in the XFL. The XFL just rekindled this year. The USFL brought back these spring leagues, and we've seen plenty of them over the last several years. Are they actually going to become a breeding ground for the National Football League? Will we see guys who do spend a spring in the XFL and then actually make and contribute on the NFL level? We are seeing a couple of guys signed out of the spring leagues, and Rambo is just one of them.
Yeah, a little bit of a flurry now that the XFL has finished with the mighty Arlington Renegades. Dallas finally gets a championship. Arlington Renegades win the XFL championship. A bunch of guys got signed, and it's going to be difficult for them. But I do think it's, I always talk about reps, live reps being, there's only so much you can do in practice.
Yep.
I always go back to the World League and the quarterbacks, and it really helped those guys. Brad Johnson, Jake Delhomme, Kurt Warner, big time starting quarterbacks. And I think playing in that league it just means more live reps. And I think now that Vince McMahon is out of the way of the XFL, they're taking it more seriously, the football part of it. I think there's more of an opportunity for these guys to get sort of noticed. And there has been at least well over a dozen XFL players getting in NFL camps. And that's obviously the first step. Look, and Nick Sirianni brought up Adam Thielen. No, Adam Thielen was not only – I don't think people understand where Adam Thielen came from. He was not invited to the combine. He was at one of those regional combines. And he ran like a 4.42 at his size, which was everybody was like, oh, why'd we miss this guy? And then he had to go be a tryout player like Charleston Rambo. He wasn't even signed as an undrafted free agent. He was a tryout player. And then they signed him. And, they got him in camp and they said, wow, this guy can run routes and he's athletic. And they started him out on special teams and he took to that role. And all of a sudden there's an injury and they put him in there and he just didn't stop, he just, and that's what Nick Sirianni said. Don't miss Adam Thielen. Don't miss Adam Thielen. When I asked him the question, how can a tryout player sort of catch your eye? And Nick's very involved, as you know, with the receivers.
Mm-hmm.
And please don't think I'm saying Charleston Rambo is Adam Thielen, but I'm saying you never know. You never know because they do miss players. They do miss players occasionally.
Right. And Sirianni was making an overall point, not a comp this wide receiver to this wide receiver type point. That wasn't what he was doing. That wasn't what he meant. But the way you laid it out, I certainly understand it. Sometimes guys come out of nowhere, that guys that have been missed by not one team and not two teams, but all teams. 32 teams didn't draft him. No team signed him as a free agent. He had to make it via the tryout camp to be able to get into the National Football League. And correct me if I'm wrong, but he's a Minnesota guy, right? And that probably gave the Vikings an inside track, and that they didn't have to pay to bring him in. Didn't have to pay as much to bring him in. Just get in your car and drive over to the facilities, Adam, and we'll give you a look-see. And next thing you know, the guy is going out and putting up the kind of numbers that he did. So, you find your players in all different ways. And this is that time of the season where you're getting tryout guys. The Eagles brought a bunch in last week. You said you weren't surprised. I just meant by the day I didn't know it was going to be today or tomorrow or the next day or when it was going to happen. They did just announce one yesterday. Does that mean that you think the Eagles are done, that the rest of these tryout player guys had their moment in the sun and that they're not going to be Philadelphia Eagles?
Not necessarily. I mean, there are, there's the XFL market. I keep meaning to count up the players. I don't know where the Eagles are. I think
they still have a couple of spots left. Yeah.
Yeah, they're 86. So they got 4 spots. So, I mean, they're going to be at 90. So they're going to add, and it might be another tryout player. They might be, trying to, as I said, this new market, the XFL market, we keep talking about linebacker. I think they're going to bring in a veteran linebacker at some point. Could be soon, could be after June 1st, when June 1st is a big day in the NFL as far as guys getting cut. But they have a little bit of wiggle room and they're not going to camp with less than 90 players. So, I mean, they got to add 4.
And who those 4 may be. ESPN speculated the other day that Miles Jack, who is probably the most experienced, accomplished, certainly the highest drafted free agent linebacker who's still out there, is someone who could fit with the Eagles Again, probably come down to what kind of price it is. You never know with these free agents who are still sitting out there. Have they overvalued themselves on the market? Has it been complete and utter lack of interest? A guy like Miles Jack is a name that's certainly recognizable, but he hasn't signed anywhere. You'd see him as a fit for the Eagles.
I'd have to look into. Obviously a big name. I don't know where he is in his career. Obviously, it never lived up to the hype. I know coming out early in this process, I mean, people were talking about him like a potential top 10 pick, and all of a sudden he had some injury issues. So that part, then they were sort of degenerative that kind of pushed him down the board. But the Eagles need help at linebacker. I mean, they're bringing in somebody. We've talked about it. I just find it very hard to believe that they're going to start the season with Nicholas Morrow. I think they're fine with Nakobe Dean, but even that is uncertainty. I don't think you can just ignore it to the point of what they seem to be ignoring it at this stage. And look, they devalue the position. A lot of people devalue the position, but I mean, all you have to do is go back to last year. TJ Edwards and Kaiser White were solid players. Whatever you want to knock TJ for not being drafted, he was a good player. And I just, that is a tremendous drop off to the point where when Peter wrote his column, and we referenced it a lot and said can't find a weakness, I said, boy, you're not looking hard enough, because linebacker's pretty stinking obvious.
It certainly jumps off the page to me. And again, you just got a peek at the rookie camp, tryout camp. They did release the numbers on the undrafted free agents the Eagles signed, and the guy who got the second biggest guarantee was the linebacker Ben Van Sumeren from Michigan State. Is he going to be in their mix as far as depth chart goes, and will he be given a chance to actually not only make the team, but maybe actually get a chance to play from the line of scrimmage? I find it tough to believe, since they used a third-round draft pick on Nakobe Dean this past year and got him on the field for about 35 snaps over the course of the entire season, but there is more of an opportunity now because there aren't two starting linebackers in camp, guys with resumes like there were last year with Edwards and White. So there's more of an opportunity here. Is an undrafted free agent like Van Sumeren in the mix for you?
Not to play special teams. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about, Ben is a tremendous athlete. I mean, he can, at his size, he's like 6'3", 235. So that's good for the Eagles because they have so many undersized linebackers. But the knock on him is he's just not instinctive, but he's one of the best athletes at the position, which tells you, and he went undrafted. So that kind of tells you how unrefined he is as, playing off-ball linebacker. But, maybe 2-3 years down the road, if he makes the team, and man, if he can run and he can play special teams, the Eagles need help there. And all of a sudden, I just mentioned Thielen on the offensive side of the ball. He started as a special teams player. He was a great special teams player. And then all of a sudden, he develops, turns into a star. That would be more the road. As far as throwing him in there, TJ was undrafted, but TJ was undrafted for the opposite reason. Very instinctive player, tremendous player at Wisconsin. Second in the Butkus Award, but he ran a 4.87. And people are like, well, he ran a 4.87. And ultimately, he had a bad day, overcame it. Probably the next day, he was never a speed guy, as we know. Probably the next day would have ran a 4.7 or something much more palatable, but he had a bad day. And he ran a 4.87, and they're like, oh, second in the Butkus Award, All-American. Who cares? Can't run. We're not going to draft you. Ben's kind of the opposite of that. Not very instinctive, but it's just lights out as an athlete.
Well, that's the kind of thing we're going to be talking about with our first guest, because he is very in-depth on scouting and how players get into the league and what they have to do when they get there. He also knows the agency business a little bit. Neil Stratton from InsideLeague.com is going to join Mac and Mac on Birds 365 next. Stick around.
Do you